Welcome back or welcome front if it's the first time joining us. This is Adventure Game Hotspot Podcast. I am Joshua, and as always, Jack Allen. How you doing, my friend?
I am excellent. Keeping busy, but that seems to be the permanent state of my life these days. How about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful as well. It's cold. I'm in the
Hey,
Midwest. It's cold. You're in
dude,
Canada. What's the weather over there?
I'm in Canada, exactly. Yeah. Oh, it's pretty mild here,
Oh man. And I
relatively speaking. When I say pretty mild, pretty mild for December.
We're having weather over here, and I have a leak in my roof. I've been up
Uh-oh.
on the roof for 4 days trying to fix it. I've come to the conclusion now that I just have to have my whole roof redone. so,
Ouch. Uh-oh.
yeah, bad timing too because of all the weather. But good
Yeah,
time to have a fun time
that's
today
true.
on this podcast. We're going to be talking about our underappreciated games that we have played, adventure games, and also guilty pleasure adventure games that we have played. And we're gonna have a lot of fun with it. At least I hope. In the meantime, why don't you tell us this last week in review when it comes to our website, Adventure Game Hotspot?
Yeah, another full week, of course. We had a review of Nine Noir Lives, a
Oh
really
yeah.
gorgeous hand drawn point and click adventure games
Mm-hmm.
uh, that will appeal to cat lovers the world over. This is like filled to the brim with cats and cat puns. So if you're into felines, check that out. We also reviewed a black and white puzzle platformer under seas called Silt. And I really love those kinds of games, so I'm looking forward to checking that one out. And the other thing we did not a review, but we did our uh, sort of trailer preview of upcoming games this month. And this drives me nuts, but every single month it happens. Like no sooner do we put the list together and compile it, and we can't make any more changes than some other game is announced like the very next day saying, yes, next month is. So this month the game is the Forest Quartet,
Mm-hmm.
which is like a really interesting surrealist isometric music based game. So it looks really interesting to me. So unfortunately that didn't make our video, but it is coming out next month, so I'm looking forward to that. New releases this week. A freeware game. If you've spent all your Christmas money, you can check out a new game called Elsewhere in the Night from the developer of The Corruption Within and Blood Nova. And there's this really funky looking pixel art game called Professor Crackbrain and the Awakening of the Were Dog. So that should appeal to the retro lovers among us. And Burnhouse Lane, a new horror game from the creator of The Cat Lady, which is very popular. So, and the console players get a couple games too, a narrative adventure called Hindsight and Watch Over Christmas. So, if you want to get into the holiday spirit, you can check that out if you've got a console. And for news, kind of a light week for news, but today I announced one game called Europa, which I think looks a lot of fun. Sort of a 3D light action adventure, but really gorgeous and yeah, it looks like a real adventure to me. So
Yeah, the indie games are getting indie. Like there's subgenre of indie now.
oh
Like
yeah,
and and they're so interesting. It's like you mentioned the one. What was it called again? That's like a music based game.
yeah, Forest Quartet.
Forest Quartet. I love it. I mean, good grief! You want to get something with some ambiance? There you
Yeah,
go. So, and and of course the cat games. They're coming left. They're coming right. It's raining cats and cats
they're
right
all the
now.
rage, man.
I made a
And I love
video.
cats, so I don't mind.
I made a video about Stray, and basically it was just a funny way to mock cats, which I love cats. That's the funny thing
Okay.
of it.
All
But
right.
oh man, people didn't care much for that.
The claws came out, so to speak, eh?
I love cats, everybody, and that game was it was short but fun. Stray, I played, and so we
I haven't played it
reviewed
yet.
that a
Really,
while
really
back.
want to.
What's that?
I haven't played it yet, but I really, really want to. It looks like fun.
Yeah, fun game. So speaking of fun, we're going to have some of that. We're going to talk about games that Jack and I have each thought were fun in the past. We still think that they're fun. Sometimes we are maybe even a little bit embarrassed to play them. And we're going to talk about underappreciated games that people just didn't care for as much we believe they should. Some call them underrated. But I think that some of these they've been rated, just not rated to where we think that they're going to be, which would be a fancy way of saying underrated. We were supposed to have a guest on today, but we had to reschedule him to next week, and so we quickly threw this together. But I think this is going to be a good one.
Nothing quick about it, man. I told you, my memory is so bad about games that I've played that, like, I immediately thought of a whole bunch of games that would suit this category, but then I started going, I don't remember anything about that. I remember they were great, or I really liked them, or this or that, and then I go, but I don't remember anything about them. I have nothing to say. So I spent all afternoon like researching the games that I really enjoyed. As dumb as that.
Well, if you can't even remember some of them or some of the aspects of them, just say what you could remember.
Oh, no.
There is a couple I did not research, but I'll try to go off right here.
Okay.
15, 20
You're
years
telling
ago.
me it's okay, so you can do it.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
You
Sure.
understand. So why don't you set the standard for us? Why don't you take off, let this plane fly? Tell us what
All right. Okay. First of all, I refuse to call it a guilty pleasure. I feel no guilt about anything I enjoy, no matter how ridiculous it is. So, people like what they like, right? And I think this first game is a perfect example of that. I think I'm actually going to go on record and say it is my favorite game from Telltale, which probably no one else on Earth will say, which is the Bone series. Their very first series that never got finished. I will never forgive them for crapping out after 2 episodes, but yeah, it was their very first adventure game. They'd done like the poker game before that, so this was kind of the coming out party for Telltale, really, and I just thought it perfectly suited Jeff Smith's Bone series, a graphic novel series with amazing, gorgeous books, which I own and have read all of them too. So, maybe I was kind of primed to like the game as well, but I just thought it really perfectly suited the style. It was kind of cartoony, but simplistic. So, Telltale wasn't sort of really refined graphically back then, so the simpler style I thought really suited Bone. And I love the characters, 3 sort of Pillsbury Doughboyish characters named Phone Bone, Phony Bone, and Smiley Bone. And there are 3 cousins that get into all sorts of trouble. And there's some great secondary characters, a little bug named Ted, and a love interest, and sinister rat creatures and possum children and stuff like that. So it's just an amazing world, and I really, really, really wish they'd finish that series because I love those games. Now, they weren't great. I just thought, this is perfect Bone kind of thing. You know what I mean?
I remember when it was announced. Obviously, at the time, the whole company was big news for all of us, adventure game fans. They were going to, and in many ways they did, kind of help rekindle the adventure game genre again. And Definitely. When that was announced, I'm like, wow, okay, so we see what they're doing. They have beautiful graphics, beautiful styles that they're going for, and they're going for popular IPs. So I was very, very excited about the time. Wasn't all that interested in Bone itself, but I've always thought about it, and man, I kind of wanted to play their first round just to see how they were establishing themselves and kind of set the preface for everything else that they were doing. I think for my first one that I'm going to do, I think I'm going to do an underappreciated one first, and not do one that we have a guilty pleasure over, because I think this perfectly exemplifies what I think of when I think of underappreciated. I think of The Dig. Now,
Okay.
The Dig was rated highly, so I can't say
Mm,
it's underrated. But when you compare The Dig to its peers, when you
yeah.
compare The Dig to its brother and its sister at LucasArts, it was the redheaded stepchild
Yeah.
of that company. But it was just a wonderful story. First and foremost, wonderful story, and how could it not? First of all, you had Steven Spielberg who wanted to make a movie off of the well established book.
Yeah.
And I think that they captured the book and everything that they wanted very well. And they did it in a way that I think another reason why it might be maybe underappreciated at the time is because none of the characters truly stood out. But the game as a whole, it's like amalgamation of things that work together. And I really wish that it got more appreciation. Great
Yeah.
score. It got great ratings, but more appreciation when people talk about it being one of the greats and of the classic adventure game era. Did you play that one?
I did play it. Naturally, I don't remember much about it, but
Well,
that's anytime I say I don't remember anything about a game, it's no reflection of its quality. That is just my pure Civ like memory. But yeah, it was a really, really well made game.
mhm.
Um, I wonder if it's because it wasn't funny. Like LucasArts was sort of, well, I guess Indiana Jones wasn't funny either, but for the most part, they were kind of,
They had quirkiness to them.
the comedy games and cartoony, and all of a sudden there was this sort of serious sci-fi game, and people just, we don't know what to make of it. But like, I don't know. I'm just like trying to think of a reason because yeah, quality-wise, it should have been, embraced just as strongly as some of those others. So
Yeah,
yeah, good game.
that's you. You're next, buddy.
All right. I kind of tipped my hand in a previous podcast about this one. It's going back to 1998 to John Saul's Blackstone Chronicles.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like, really, this is a game by Legend Entertainment, and like, really, any game from Legend is
Is that a
underappreciated. I have
Legends?
no idea
I didn't
why.
know that. I never knew that.
You didn't know
I
Blackstone Chronicles was
I did not
Legend?
know it was from Legend. Huh?
Well, it's sort
Interesting.
of not really typical Legend, so that's
Mm-hmm.
probably why. But man, everything they made was great, and yet is underrated. So this is kind of like it stands on its own as my underrated game, but it also sort of stands in for all of Legends catalog too. But anyway, so the game's about it's a first person um sort of node based game, which I don't tend to like, but this is an awesome one. You're going into an old insane asylum that's been shut for 40 years, and it's now being um, turned into a museum of psychiatric history.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots going on, but you're the son of the former superintendent there, who was just so almost evil incarnate, and he died while he was working there, and he sort of talks to you during the adventure as a ghost. In fact, everyone you hear from in the game is a ghost of someone who died in that insane asylum. So, but like it's not a horror game. You don't have to worry about jump scares or anything like that. The horror is in hearing about the
It's ominous.
real not torture. I call it torture devices. The real treatment
Mm-hmm.
devices that they used, but were in fact torture for the people going through them. Like steam boxes where you're blocked in at the neck and just like you know incredible heat blasted at you. Electroshock chairs,
Mm.
like a coffin like heat chamber, or like devices where people are cut open and left to bleed out, kind of thing, to, I don't know, dispel something. I have no idea. These things are barbaric, but they were actual psychiatric treatments not even that long ago. So it's sort of a double barreled horror. You get these very clinical explanations of these devices and these treatments that we used to use, and then you hear from the ghosts who tell them about how they absolutely destroyed their lives and stuff like that. So it's a really retching wrenching drama too. So really, really interesting. And I again have to give a shout out to the voice actor who did the dead superintendent. I forget his name now, but in the game he's Malcolm Metcalf. Just absolute brilliance.
Scientific history is mortifying, man. I mean, I think that's
It
the word.
is
Like you said, barbaric. Barbaric is a good description of scientific history.
amazing, and not that long ago. Like it's one thing if you're talking about 1,000 years ago, but these are things that's still being used like 80 years ago or 100 years ago, like not that long ago. Ugh.
There's still regions in the world that use bloodletting, and
Yeah,
so
crazy.
okay, let's go with a guilty pleasure. And this is a true guilty pleasure, one that I'm often embarrassed about. Like, if I was playing the game, I wouldn't really want to play it around my wife because she might be upset,
All right.
Is,
Okay.
is the Leisure Suit Larry series.
Ah, yes.
They are so bad. I mean, back then, especially when they were released, when they first started, like, they were obviously they were a type of game that wasn't made very often. You had soft porn adventure, and then it converted into like Leisure Suit Larry. That
Right.
wasn't something that was very popular at the time, but as it started progressing, they started getting a little bit more risque, a little bit more. I don't know if it was intentionally racist. Like you go into any quickie mart or anything, and
Right. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
they did these today, they'd be canceled.
Yeah.
But back then
Yeah.
it was okay. We were laughing our butts off and everything. And it's the humor is the epitome of what we're trying to go for with this
No,
topic.
absolutely.
It's a guilty pleasure. Who else? I mean, who didn't play that game? Just especially as a young child like myself, like just looking for those boobs. And
Yeah.
that's what Leisure Suit Larry was, man.
Yeah.
I truly did learn a lot about the world from Leisure Suit Larry, and I'm not even being a jokester in saying that. There was certain types of like almost stereotypes and types of people. I learned what the word cougar meant, from
Oh, yeah.
that, like those type of things. But yeah, Leisure Suit Larry, very very fun game. I haven't played the new ones. Have
Yeah.
you?
I was going to ask because I've heard it's sort of less, innuendo, kind of more in your face kind of thing, which is a little hard to believe when you think back to some of the stuff
Yeah,
the older games did. But
I'm kind of
I have not had a
torn.
chance to play them either.
I talked with Al Lowe about it, and I told him that I hadn't played it, and he said good, and I told him I'd never play it to his face. Now I really want to play it though. Like
Yeah.
it's one of those games. There's a couple games there that were they're highly rated too, and
Yeah.
I would like to play it, but
Yeah, and it's an interesting twist on the like you actually
modern.
brought up the sort of the racism and stuff that
Mm-hmm.
was acceptable back then but wouldn't be now. Well, now it's Larry in modern times, so it's interesting to see how the developers handle
Mm-hmm.
that. So, but I have not yet played them anyway. Yeah, either. My next one is again a, sort of a celebration of an underappreciated game and studio. I think the
Mm-hmm.
studio is Keops Studio, and they were one of the few who were still putting out games during the quote unquote dead period of the adventure genre. And
Mm-hmm.
in 2004, they came out with a little game called Return to Mysterious Island.
Oh really?
And
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had zero expectations of this. Like I just thought it was just going to be another milk toast
Yeah.
mist clone kind of thing, but it wasn't. It really surprised me, and pleasantly so. Like on the surface, it is
Beautiful.
very mist-like in the sense. I mean, it's beautiful. You're on a tropical island. You play as a young woman named Mina whose ship crashes and she's on a deserted island. This is based on the Jules Verne novel, of course. So, this ultimately will trace back to Captain Nemo and the Nautilus and stuff like that. But that's all kind of window dressing. It's mainly just a first person survive the island and solve puzzles kind of thing. What really makes the game stand out is that the game basically introduced crafting before crafting was a thing. Like inventory puzzles existed before that, obviously, mostly in the realm of third-person games. So it was kind of strange for a first-person one to be doing it, but it really blew up the inventory process. Like you could combine up to 5 different things to create more complex tools, and it had its own little separate uh, interface for inventory where like if you combine 2 things that were part of a bigger chain, it would show you that there were more things yet to be added, but not what things. So it's just like really, really clever, and it just made your mind go, "Oh man, I want to combine stuff."
Yeah.
Right? Like it was that was the joy of the game was I just want to combine stuff. I didn't care about the story. I didn't care about the characters or anything else. I just wanted to combine stuff. It's so much fun, and you could disassemble. Like if you realize, though, I need something for some other combination that I'm currently using for a fishing rod or something like that. We disassemble the fishing rod back into component pieces and use it in something else. So much fun and really clever. And it hasn't really been repeated much since then. I don't know why, because it's so much fun.
The fans know Adventure Game Geek. He raves about that game. He's big on those styles of game. And I did play a little bit of it, being an avid Jules Verne fan. So I figured I had to check it out. But that was also an era to where I had a bias against those type of games. I went into all of those games thinking I'm not going to like it. So
Yep.
you truly had to be a truly great game
Yeah.
to keep me going. And I remember thinking it was a pretty good game, but there was other things that I was preferring to play at
Yeah.
the time. And that is one thing on my list of games that I've always kind of wanted to go back and see what a lot of the, at the time the hubbub was about. But you mentioned it, it's kind of gone, it's forgotten in people's eyes in many, in many ways. We don't think
Yeah, it's
back
kind
as
of
that as one of the
throwing the
top
baby out
games.
with the bathwater. Like there were a lot of I'm the same as you. Like there were so many of the kind of missed clones, generic missed clones that were coming out, and like you, I didn't enjoy most of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this one really grabbed me. So, but yeah, we're kind of past that era, and I think people forgot about Return to Mysterious Island, and it isn't sort of remembered as fondly as it should be, I think.
Real quick, yes or no, and maybe a little bit of analysis. If you remember the game Jewels of the Oracle.
Oh, yeah, I remember the game, but I didn't play it. So,
Okay. Yeah, that was the one that just truly turned me off to the rest of that genre after that. I tried so hard to finish it, and it was straight up boring. That's kind of what threw me off on that. So, apologies to the fans of Jewels of the Oracle. Okay, so my next one's going to be, let's see what I got down here, Gilbert Goodmate. And
yes.
do you remember that game?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Well, as much as I remember any game,
right. Well,
I
that
played it.
I feel like that got a bad reputation at the time because it felt like a today modern indie game. If that game was made today, there would be rave reviews about it. But in the era that it was released, we had AAA adventure games.
Right. Yeah.
And it was relatively short, but it was hilarious. It was covert laughter coming out of me like everywhere, like what like out of the blue, just like you don't realize it just comes up behind you and stabs you right in the kidney with the comedy. And I feel like that if that was released today, people would be all over it.
Yeah.
And they were talking about making a second one, and I was very, very much all for it. But never transpired. But it was a charming game. That's a good way of saying it. It's definitely Monkey Island inspired. It had those style of jokes, except like I said, a little bit of the covert jokes coming in there as well. But beautiful, cool characters in a world that you would never think would make a good conditions to make a good video game. So, what was it? The Mushroom Fangoria
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
something like. So yeah, that's an underappreciated game.
Yeah, and under marketed too. I think. Did it ever get like a formal publisher, or like it seemed to only sort of be like I don't even remember where I bought it, kind of thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it just didn't seem to be sold in the places you'd normally look to find a game.
Well, that's the thing. Back then, there was advertisement for like true advertising for adventure games, and it was not being pushed. It was a true indie in a big developer industry at the time, and so.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed
Well,
that one.
I'm gonna go sort of the opposite of the light and cheerful Gilbert
Mm-hmm.
Goodmate to a war game, which you wouldn't at first glance think is a war game.
Mm-hmm.
It's Valiant Hearts: The Great War from Ubisoft, making a rare dabble in the adventure genre, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a side-scrolling game with very much with a graphic novel aesthetic. And so I think I think people were confused about what it was.
Mm-hmm.
It is very much an adventure game. It does have some light action, a little bit of light platforming, but it's mainly a side-scrolling adventure game. But there's a lot of sort of secondary action happening around you because you're in the middle of a war.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that made it so brilliant. You play, there's four different characters. Their stories are connected, but not sort of directly intertwined. Like there's an American soldier, there's a German, there's a Red Cross nurse kind of thing, and they're all accompanied by a Red Cross dog, which is pretty awesome. And he even factors into some of the puzzles. But yeah, so like it wasn't a sort of take side sort of thing. It was just showing how horrible war was and stuff like that, but in a very fun way and mostly done through puzzle. The occasional stealth sequence or chase sequence or something of it, but like it was really, really impressive, and it was so gorgeous too. So really impressed me.
Never played that. However, Stu's Game Reviews has asked if you've played 1111 Memories Retold.
I haven't. Want to? I haven't. It looks really interesting art style, so I really want to try it.
Yeah, he says it sounds kind of similar to what you're describing. And I'm glad that you brought that up because, in many ways, I believe that my next choice is almost description by description from what you said verbatim, except not a war game. Um, Twinson's Adventure, Relentless.
Ah,
Remember? Same type of thing, maybe a little bit of a overhead camera view. A lot of people didn't think of it as an adventure game at the time
yeah.
because you were moving the character around. In every way, that was an adventure. And I kind of really wanted to bring that up because there's going to be another one that's coming out next
Really?
year. Yeah.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear
There's
that.
a
Okay.
well, they say next year. However, we'll
Right.
see about
I
that.
will see. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so there's been two already, and so there's going to be a third. And so yeah, Twins' Adventures Relentless was a very underrated game. Well, no, underappreciated game. It was rated very highly, but
Right.
underrated in the adventure game industry. Stu says that he agrees with Leisure Suit Larry for the guilty pleasure as well.
I think you probably get a lot of agreements on it. Now, this is a strange one. Talk about underappreciated. This was a game that's going back to 2002, which was released, amazingly enough, by Konami for the PlayStation 2 first.
Really?
It did get ported to PC later. The game is called Shadow of Destiny, or
Mm-hmm.
in Europe, it's called Shadow of Memories. And it's a really, really interesting sort of time travel, murder
Mm-hmm.
mystery, part fantasy, part love story. Like it's got a lot going on, but sort of the key thing is that you're solving your own murder. You are dead at this. This is not a spoiler. You are
Okay.
dead at the start of the game, and you're given a chance by this very mysterious character to go back and try and either solve or prevent your own murder. So you do that, and you get to go back to different eras of the same sort of little European town at various times. And I think the farthest one back is like the late 1600s or something like that. So like a really interesting mix of time periods and stuff. But it really leans into the kind of space-time continuum where, if you mess with something in the past, it has, unforeseen impact on the future kind of thing. So everything has unanticipated consequences. So it's all about experimenting, and you're going to die over and over and over again because fate wants you dead. That's how it started, right? So you're going to have to work really, really, really hard to escape the loop. But anyway, it was really interesting. And Konami did nothing to market it. It just sort of appeared on like a bottom shelf of a store at the time or something. And, I just happened to luck into it, and I played it and loved it and went, why isn't everyone talking about this game? Oh, because nobody knows about it.
That sounds like a awesome premise. First of all, I love any solve 'em games like Among Us or like those type of things. But if you're adding time travel and then have consequences for what you do, and that is a really, really unique and engaging type of game.
Different.
So now my next underappreciated game is going to be Ween the Prophecy.
Oh, okay.
Now, that was also underrated. In fact, when recently asked Roberta Williams, not me, somebody else was talking about some of those, the cocktail games, and she mentioned that they all stank. Over at PAX, she said, no, she should have said that like to everybody, that they all stank, but they sold well. But right. Ween the Prophecy didn't really sell all that well. But it is it would be a popular style game today. It's got that type of graphic style. Not your typical cocktail style of graphics at the time. It's got some RPG elements to it, but a very much an adventure game. You have your companion, little fruit bat. You had like you're solving a puzzle. This is a first person experience game too. So okay. But it didn't feel like a first person style of game. Lots of cool cutscenes. And back then, and we're talking 1991-ish, when you had like movie style cutscenes in there, those were big. I mean, that was a big deal. Like the beginning of Warcraft 1, or Warcraft had like the gold and the skeletons. They were like, whoa, this is like production. And that's the way I felt for Ween the Prophecy.
Interesting. I have to double check. I'm fairly certain I still own that game on the 3.5-inch disc.
I definitely have a couple copies myself, and big box copies. Stu I can't play it really now. Engaged in this conversation. He's talking about all of the Legend games, and that is very much popular. What is it about Legend games where every single one of them are underappreciated, underrated?
Well, it just didn't really have the production values that Sierra and LucasArts had. So, and I guess they just they were kind of the little brother to those two titans, you know what I mean? So they're great games, covers. But they're simple. They're not splashy. They probably don't necessarily market well. I don't know.
Kind of like Ween too. They kind of felt role playing a little bit too with some of those. It kind of felt like that at the time. I love Deathgate. Mm.
Yeah. And there were others too, and I can't even remember them offhand. But Callahan's Cross Time Saloon was an amazing Legend game that written by Josh
Mandel.
Thank you. I'm going. How could I forget Josh's last name? But yes, Josh Mandel. So one of many, but
friend
great
of the show.
Yeah. So you and I have actually spent a fair bit of time in our own separate worlds on
Mhm.
a new Ron Gilbert game today. But I'm going to go back to a different Ron Gilbert game, and probably one that most people don't even remember.
Whoa,
And
you're
if they
going there.
do, they certainly wouldn't put it up with, the Monkey Islands. But I'm going to talk about The Cave from
Oh, okay.
2013. It's another one I just don't think people knew what to make of it. It kind of looks like a puzzle platformer, action adventure, but it really isn't. Like there's a little bit of running and jumping, but that's more just a more physical means of getting from point A to point B. Very much an adventure game for the most part, and a really really clever one.
Hmm.
Is similar to Maniac Mansion. You get to choose 3 of 7 possible characters. They all have their own stories, their abilities and stuff like that. So it's good for replaying and mixing and matching. There's no right or wrong choice. You just whoever appeals to you. And like it's really, really interesting. Like this is no normal. Like it all takes place in a quote unquote cave, but this is like no cave we've ever seen. There's like a science laboratory with nuclear weapons,
Hmm.
and there's a carnival and a desert island and a medieval castle and stuff like that. So it's like really imaginative, and I loved the sort of added physicality of a little bit of running and jumping just to you know
Keep it light.
take away from the tedium of pointing and clicking. So
Hmm.
I loved it, and it didn't get nearly enough love from the adventure gaming community, and I don't really know. uh, Partly it could be because again it wasn't a funny game. It had a few little chuckles here and there, but it wasn't Monkey Island where were playing it for the laughs. The cave narrated, and that was kind of clever, but I think again people probably didn't even really realize it was a Ron Gilbert game because it wasn't very Gilbert-esque, but
Hmm.
I really enjoyed it.
I thought you were going like Freddy Fish and Putt Putt
Kind of.
games. You want to talk about like underrated or well, they weren't unknown, but I had no idea Ron Gilbert made those. So
Yeah.
okay, so I'm going to go. Let's see, we've done five now, and we
I think
have
we did 6. I think I just did
oh,
my 6.
that's your sixth. So I've got
Yeah.
two more. So I have one more underappreciated and one more guilty
Guilty pleasure.
pleasure.
All right. All right.
So
Color
for
me
let me get
intrigued.
the underappreciated out of the way. I'm gonna go with Space Quest 5.
Oh,
It was highly rated. However, it was underappreciated compared to the other Space Quest games of its era. Everybody talks about Space Quest, 1 through 4,
right.
the team, the two guys from Andromeda era. But Space Quest 5, Space Quest 4 is my favorite, but 5 is very, very close. I think it had the best antagonist combination in there. First of all, you have like the aliens, and then second of all, you had your boss who becomes like a mutant guy. They're just a truly sleazy scumbag character in that, and it has some really cool side games and just a very very underappreciated. It should be talked about as one of the great Space Quest games and one of the great Sierra games as well, but it doesn't get spoken of enough.
Why is that? Why do you think?
I think
I
it has
mean,
to
you
do
sold me.
with, well, at the time, the two kind of split up,
Yeah.
and so I don't know which one stuck around and did that one. I'm not good with the
Right.
names. I
Yeah.
kind of
I
get them
remember
both
the history, but
combined or something. um and the jokes kind of went a little bit of a different way. Still cue hauling, like laugh out loud, funny, but just different types of funniness. You could definitely tell the writing style was different,
right.
but also I think that was what made it also a good game because it's not 100%. I'm gonna laugh at pop culture all of the time and just try to make the game to make jokes, but they made jokes along throughout the story of the game. And so I thought it was a phenomenal game.
Hmm. Okay. I'm going to say something that will be sacrilegious to many adventure games. I have never played a Space Quest game. I admit it.
Oh, wow.
I know
Mm-hmm.
it's a glaring hole in my repertoire. And I always wanted to, but man, it's tough to talk your. If you didn't play them at the time, or at least closer to the time, boy, it's hard to talk. And like I'm a completist too, so I'd want to start at one, and I just every time I contemplated, I went, I'm not ready for it yet.
Well,
So
Stu
I
says
have not
that
played a Space Quest game.
Stu is he is a huge knowledge base when it comes to past games, and
Yeah, I
he
should have
says
talked to him
that
before.
right. He says that it's because at the time it wasn't voiced and it wasn't available on CD, and so it got less exposure because of
Right.
that. And so
Makes
yeah, I could
sense.
see that
Yeah,
happening. Definitely has
absolutely.
been voiced since then, and it's great.
Yeah. We talk about
Was
games that are underappreciated.
mm-hmm.
I think there are games that are underappreciated by the sort of mainstream community, like the really good point and click games that the mainstream ignores. And I think there are some games that are just underappreciated by the adventure community. I've mentioned a couple of them already, but this last one, like those that have played the game are going to go, "What do you mean underappreciated?" Everyone who plays it loves it,
Mm-hmm.
but I still don't hear it being talked about with reverence among adventure gamers like I think it deserves to be. The game is What Remains of Edith Finch.
Mm.
And, Joshua, you and I have talked about how there's sort of less gameplay, fewer puzzles, less challenge. So this is the sort of game I thought, and this is very much one of those. It's more of interactive story than a sort of puzzly traditional adventure game. So, I didn't really have like strong expectations going in, and I was just blown away. It is so amazing. Some of the best interactive storytelling I have ever experienced. And again, it's just so imaginative. It's about a young woman whose family is cursed to die in strange and tragic and sort of mysterious ways.
Mm-hmm.
And she's coming back to her childhood home, secluded, really amazing house, to sort of grapple with this family curse and, maybe her own future as well, because she's part of the family and she's still alive and most of the others aren't. So she goes through the house and she kind of reconnects with the various family members that have met different ends, and each one splits off into its own little vignette, and it totally different from all the rest. One you're playing like an owl, I think, that's swooping down and snatching up. I may have the details wrong, but another one you're basically in like an actual comic, like a comic book, a horror comic book kind of thing. Like you just sort of never know what the next little vignette story is going to be. But so like I loved the variety, and again, like I said, the storytelling really amazing. It's you're going to feel for this young woman and for her accursed family by the time you're done. So this is a must play for every adventure gamer. If you haven't played it, go get it.
Really? That is the stamp of approval right there. It's on my bucket list. I talk about my biases that I have in games that I've tried to get over, especially when it
No,
comes to the adventure game genre. I mentioned kind of some of those misclone biases that I had for a while, and this is one of those style of games that I have a bias for.
yep.
However, I played Kentucky Route Zero games, and ever since then, played Firewatch. I've really wanted to kind of get into more of those style games, and so that is definitely
Yeah.
going towards the top of my to play list.
Of those two, Edith Finch blows them out of the water. So,
Really? No
oh yeah, yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
Okay.
When I say must play, I mean must play.
Gotcha. Not
And I'm
just
the
let's
same as
play,
you.
let's
I like
play.
a little more meat on the bone. So
Sure.
I had low expectations. Just amazing, amazing game.
All right. So, my last one, this is a guilty pleasure game, and for obvious reasons, we're going to talk about Warcraft Adventures. So, thank you to
Oh,
somebody, a
that
friend
kind of
who
guilt.
gave me those files, to play. No, I have not completed it, so I don't want to, act like I know everything about it. But about 3 months ago, they came out with a speech pack, like a fixed speech pack, and the cutscenes and everything. So if you had the original like gameplay files and you mix them together, you could get a pretty good game with very minimal bugs. And
Yep.
I've probably played a third of the game, and as far as I could tell, I've not experienced any bugs. I could see why they didn't end up putting the game out, because by the time that it was getting close to being finished, it was already so far dated, especially when it comes to Blizzard standards, that I can see why they didn't actually release it. However, it's a good game. It's a good game, a really
I
good
would think
game.
so.
So, but I mean, it's
Well,
got
when you
everything
say
you wanted in a classic era game, but it was a post-classic era. It came out. It was supposed to be released like after the Grim Fandango era, like 2001. If I like,
yeah.
so like the industry had already started caving, and Blizzard wasn't going to
Right,
go
yeah, yeah.
chasing at that point. And so,
Yeah, it's really too bad, right? I mean, even if it wasn't a huge seller for Blizzard,
mhm.
it's
You did the work.
would have been nice for us, but
Yeah, you did the work. Why not just throw it out there, or just at
throw it
least
out
release
there.
the
Yeah,
files like truly, and let's like another type of company do a third party release or something along those lines. But
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I dabbled in it too, but I didn't sort of get too far. But it is
mhm.
something I'd like to go back to. But
It looks
not that
old.
we're endorsing playing this game.
It looks old. We'll say that it looks like it's a mid '90s game.
But
So
but that matter. It's ironic. That matters far less now than it
sure.
probably did then.
Hmm.
Retro is in, pixel art is in. It's not a like, oh, it's a few years too old look anymore.
Hmm.
Now it's a thing again.
True. Very true. They could probably make a few bucks, and I don't know how much they need it, but they need it more than they did at the time that they were going to release the game.
Yeah, it's a shame.
So
Well,
there
that's a
we
good one.
go. That was our 7 games. So yeah, this was a lot of fun. Jack,
Yeah,
did you have any other like honorable mentions or anything that you just wanted to throw out there? Or?
I do have. You know what? Because we could probably keep talking about underrated games more. I'm gonna save the ones that
Okay.
that I wrote on my list but didn't get to.
Hmm.
I will just do a quick shout out to a couple that I purposely didn't name because I kind of did the last time we discussed this.
Hmm.
One is Bad Mojo, the little cockroach game, which is
Hmm.
so fun and amazing. Um, Broken Sword 3. I know, amazing that
Hmm.
neither of us talked about Broken Sword this time, but yeah, it's
What's a
got it.
podcast without
Broken Sword
BS?
3 got a bad rap. And here's another crazy statement, just like my one about Telltale. I think Broken Sword 3 is my favorite Broken Sword game. So I know I may
Wow.
stand alone. I don't care. I enjoyed
Wow.
it.
It's a great
Yes, way
story
too
for sure.
many block puzzles, but I don't care. I'm putting it out there.
Yeah, no, that's
Um,
great. I'm glad that you found that hill. You may die on that hill, but you climbed
yeah,
it. You
I
climbed
don't
it.
care. I'll keep fighting and stacking. Tim Schafer's stacking, just an amazing game that not enough people play. So,
Oh, I
but
didn't I didn't even
I
know
talked
it
about
was an
those
adventure
earlier.
game until you guys told me about that. And so, yeah, I'll just throw a couple honorable mentions because I've mentioned them so many times on the podcast before. A Book of Unwritten Tales, Black Dahlia, and what else we got? Yeah, those are the two. Other ones I'll hold for later because
Okay.
oh, the case of the serrated scalpel too.
Oh
Those are
yes.
like them. So
Well, okay.
yeah, those are a few of them. Jack, why don't you tell everybody who is watching through podcast or through YouTube what is going to be happening this upcoming week on Adventure Game Hotspot?
Well, I I'm not. Next week is a little bit up in the air. All my focus so far has been on what's happening tomorrow, which I have teased for so long it almost doesn't feel like it's going to happen. And I still will not mention it by name, but let's just say it rhymes with Flunky Highland. Remember we were talking about Ron Gilbert before? Yes, it's
Going back to Flunky Island, Flunky
like
Myland.
going back to Flunky Highland. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, we're finally doing our Return to Monkey Island review tomorrow. Yay! Way overdue, but sometimes life has plans of its own. So that's the big thing for tomorrow. Next week, it could be one of any number of great new reviews. Probably, speaking of war games, war dramas, we're going to have a review of Gerda, A Flame in Winter, I think probably next year. Maybe The Whispering Valley and Monorail Stories. That's the way I'm leaning now, but that could change, so don't quote me on that.
And I too am going to be releasing a review for Return to some place, a place that I
just
have
didn't
gone
want to.
before. Well, I'll tell you what,
It was
I am
cursed in my
releasing
mouth.
my review of Return to Monkey Island on my YouTube channel. If we get that out on our website or not, the actual website review or not, we'll see. But I have that. We were supposed to have Robert Holmes on the show this week, but he got pushed back until next week because he had an arrangement that he had forgotten about. So Robert Holmes will be on this podcast next week. Whatever way that you listen to the podcast, please, if you like it, 5-star reviews. Remember that we have Adventure Game Hotspot YouTube channel now where we put these shows on and some other goodies on there periodically. So please go over there and help support the channel by hitting subscribe. We want to get to 1,000 to where we don't have to actually stream through Weird Gaming Adventure channel. We want to keep everything Adventure Game Hotspot if possible, and it takes 1,000 subscribers to be able to do that. So this is the end of the show. Thank you to those who are in the chat today hanging out with us. Thank you to everybody who's listening, and we shall see you next week. Take care, everybody.